Hi, this is Brett Holland, and this is a presentation that I gave to the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment in New Zealand on the 1st of April 2014. This is about the world of the high-tech, high-growth entrepreneur. I know that here in New Zealand, we actively want to promote the high-tech sector. We see it as a vital component to overall economic growth. But to do so, I propose that it's critical for us in government organizations that fund initiatives in this space to think like an entrepreneur. So, being good, inquisitive people, you should be asking yourself, why in the world should we be thinking like an entrepreneur? What's the value in that? And that's a central question I want you to ask as you look through this presentation. Hopefully we'll answer that a little bit better by the time we get to the end. I'm going to go through 6 different concepts that are critical to high-tech, high-growth entrepreneurs, and then go around each one of those concepts and show you how they're critical to you as the governmental organizations that fund the initiatives to promote the growth in the sector. So the first initiative, all entrepreneurs must understand the pain. What does that mean? Well, in the marketplace, you must understand what the customer pain is that you're solving in order for your product to be successful. In fact, if I go back to one of the most respected people in the community, David Skok of Matrix Partners, who writes a blog called 4 Startups, he says there are 5 reasons why startups fail. And in this order, their market problems, business model failures, poor management teams, they can run out of cash, they have product problems, but the number one problem is they just don't match to market. They either don't understand the market pain, or the market pain isn't large enough, or it's not well defined to where the startup just will not succeed in that market. Understanding pain is critical. The second concept is you have to experiment flexibly. It used to be, back when I was younger, you'd write a big business plan and you'd take it out to investors and you'd get funding for your initiative and you'd go out to market and try to figure out how you can make the initiative work. Well, these days, that's really not what we're teaching, and it's not the way to start a startup. In fact, it's much cheaper these days to start building first, then taking to market, measuring, and learning from the market. So you go through a cycle, an iterative cycle called the build, measure, learn cycle, and it's a key tenet to this lean startup methodology that we're teaching today. But to make that all work, you have to measure the right things. So after you build and you put your product out there, you have to make sure that you're measuring the right things. Well, what are the right things to measure? Well, there's no magic there. Each business must figure out that for themselves, and I'll give you a hint. It's not just revenues and profits. As a matter of fact, at the early stages, it's often not revenues and profits at all. So let's pretend that we're all early investors in Facebook. So what did they measure that led to their first round of investment, $12.7 million, when Facebook had pretty much no revenue? Well, they looked at a couple things. They realized that Facebook was getting a rate of acquisition of users much faster than anything in space at the time. Facebook wasn't the first social site out there, but they were the first ones to really dial in and get interest. And the other key thing, which might even be more important, is the amount of time each user spent on their site was much higher than anything in the past. So what does that mean? They knew that Facebook was getting customer engagement and that they'll eventually turn that into money. And boy, they did. I mean, those investors that invested in that first round are kind of billionaires now, right? So let's look at another key tenet. Fail fast. We've all heard this. As a matter of fact, we hear it all the time. It's often abused and misused, so let's talk about what that actually means. What does it mean to fail fast? Is that scrap things if they're not measuring up? No, that's not really what it means at all. It actually means that you try something, get fast feedback, then rapidly inspect and adopt it. So double down or pivot. So you go through that build, measure, learn loop that we talked about before, but you go through it quickly and you determine, am I going to double down? Has what I learned supported my hypothesis that I went to market with? So I need to actually continue to build on it and go back out? Or doesn't mean that we're not getting it right, that we need to pivot. One thing entrepreneurs do is they network like mad. Matter of fact, I thought it'd be interesting to show. This is my LinkedIn network map. You see a lot of my connections back in Chicago. You see some of the new ones I've been building in New Zealand on the orange there, and some friends and how they interplay. And I thought it'd be interesting to reach out to a good friend of mine who I respect a ton, who's a world-class entrepreneur and networker. You might have met him. His name's Troy Hennekoff. He came here in January and spoke to us all here in New Zealand. And I asked Troy, I said, hey, I'm doing a presentation for one of the government agencies. Would you mind sending me your LinkedIn map just so I can show it? And 5 minutes later, he shot me this, and boy, you can tell. Entrepreneurs network like mad. It's a great example here. And look at the depth of the connections within that network. It's critical. An entrepreneurial ecosystem is a network, and those leaders in the ecosystem network like mad. And the last thing is you got to take a long view as an entrepreneur. So contrary to popular thinking, high-tech, high-growth businesses are not get-rich-quick schemes at all. In fact, what is a long view for high-tech, high-growth entrepreneurs? Well, if you consider that the average exit time for venture capital investment is 7 years today, and that most companies aren't going to be taking investment from venture capitalists at least 2 years into the going of the company, and then even when you do exit, you're going to be sticking around that company for a little while. Pretty much when you start a high-growth, high-tech company, plan on being in it for at least 10 years, and that's the minimum. So what does all this mean to us in the government? Well, let's go through each one of these again and see how it applies. First, we said understand the pain. What does that mean to us? Listen to and observe the entrepreneurs. Immerse yourself in the culture. They are your market. Understand their pain. So how do you do that? Well, one good way is to go and participate in startup accelerators. There's one going on right down the road here called Lightning Lab. It's the only one in New Zealand right now. It's a fantastic program. There are 10 companies in it, 100 plus mentors from all around the world that are participating. It's a 3-month intensive growth program for those companies. And companies get ready for funding at the end of it. This is a petri dish, folks. Go and observe the entrepreneurs. Immerse yourself. See what their problems are. The other thing is startup hubs. There's one that I'm most familiar with in Chicago, where I came from, called 1871. They've got 225 startup companies. There are 4 universities that have offices and actively participate, send their students into the hub to learn. There are 8 venture firms that want to tap into that community. Techstars Chicago, which is the business accelerator program in Chicago, is based in 1871, and they get 15,000 visitors a year. We have a startup hub of our own right here in New Zealand, Epic Christchurch, fantastic building. 20 companies in it, 300 staff. As a matter of fact, they even brought Google in to help them build it. You have startup hubs here. Go check them out, see what the entrepreneurs are doing. The second thing, experiment flexibly. Well, what does that mean to us? Encourage experimentation and fund for flexibility. You're the money. You can actually dictate how flexible the users are of your money. So let's look maybe across the continuum for students here in Wellington, this interest commitment continuum. You want something that's going to have multiple touch points across the continuum, all the way from investing a night to meet up with entrepreneurs through a Hackers and Founders meetup, for instance, to a weekend. Startup Weekend's a fantastic program that goes on around New Zealand. It's a worldwide program. To things like Digital Futures, which is 14 weeks. Summer of Tech, another summer commitment for doing internships in the high-tech world. To programs like you're going to hear about later, the MATE program, a master's degree in entrepreneurship. And then when you have companies formed, you can put them into accelerators and even incubators like Creative HQ or on the social side in Spiral here in Wellington. Across the entire interest commitment continuum, you want to have offerings to get people involved. The other thing, when you look at program, you want to seek programs that involve a broad diversity of participants. So all the way from entrepreneurs that are both brand new or ones that are serial entrepreneurs that have been around for a long time, their employees, students who are interested in entrepreneurship or in those programs, corporations, which is very critical and often hard to get participating, but critical because so much talent exists there and so much value can be gleaned from entrepreneurship for that talent. Investors, mentors, other service providers, accountants, marketing folks, lawyers. You want programs that get a wide diversity of participation across this, what they call entrepreneurial stack. We talked about measuring the right things. So it's critical that you measure engagement first in these programs. Remember what we talked about with Facebook? Those investors measured engagement first because they knew they could turn that into value. The benefit you guys have is entrepreneurs are very easy to read. They will engage in the things they perceive to be helpful, and they won't engage in the things that they do not. So use that as leading success indicators. I know we all have to measure things like number of companies created, number of jobs created, investment in companies and the growth in that. That's what economic development really is all about. But I'll tell you, if you don't focus on engagement first, things like number of people in a program, number of activities per month, diversity of the participants like we were talking about, or the growth rate and participation, then none of these trailing success indicators will come. Fail fast. Well, we talked about what it really means, but another thing I want to talk about here in New Zealand is that it has to be part of the learning process. We have to accept failure. It's a hard thing for us to do. Matter of fact, I think it was a really neat thing here in Wellington that startups got together and decided to put on something they call the Dead Startup Society. It was a wake for failed startups. They celebrated it. Entrepreneurs are good about that. Us in government, we're not so good about it. Let's embrace failure instead of condemning it. I wanted to note that Peter Kerr, who writes at sticknz.net, which is a great blog, said that he's pretty much thinking that we're starting to get over it. Well, let's prove him right. Network like mad. Well, what does that mean for us? We need to seek to connect people and not control the ecosystem. Startup ecosystems are networks. And networks reward participation and shun control. Think about your own networks on LinkedIn or Facebook. The people who bubble up, the people who are nodes, bigger nodes in the network are the ones who participate, who provide content, who provide value. So leaders within the network don't control the network, they're just nodes in it. And having a network depend on a hierarchy is fatal. It's been proven time and time again. Let's not provide hierarchies that we seek to control. Let's provide connection points so that the network that is the startup ecosystem can thrive. And leaders will emerge. For successful initiatives, the leaders will emerge from the community on their own. So if you force control over even who the leaders are of these initiatives, you'll kill their effectiveness. Let the leaders come up and emerge, because people are always the most important aspect of a network, much more important than the institutions around the network themselves. And the last of the 6 tenets we talked about was take a long view. Well, what does that mean for us in government? It means take a long view. So I want to leave you with this. This is something that Brad Feld says. He's the author of Startup Communities, a very well-respected authority on startups and investing in startups in the US. He says to grow a startup community, you must have a forward-looking 20-year commitment, and that resets every day. So think about it from the long view. So hopefully that was valuable to you. If you have any questions of me, please feel free to reach out to me. You can catch me on my website at bholland.co.nz or on Twitter at bhollandnz. Thanks for the opportunity to talk, and I'd be happy to connect with you.